Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 577, and today's date is January 28th, 2015, and the title of this episode is False Flag Warning, the Islamic State Threatens Obama as They Prepare an Attack on America. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand out in Greece, the new government is in place. It's the Syriza party. They are in control at this point. Alexis Tsipras and his junior coalition partner, they promised they were going to rein in austerity. They promised they were going to do a lot of different things. And here are a few things that they've already done in Greece. They have scrapped the planned privatization, scrapping fees in public hospitals and prescriptions, restore the 13th pension for low pensioners, and other actions that the Syriza had promised before the elections, and the iron barricades in front of the parliament have been removed. They were put into place to keep the people back, and we can see they scrapped all of this at this time. And we have to remember that as the IMF and the EU were putting Greece more and more into debt, the wealthy, the central banks, they were coming in and they were privatizing all different aspects of the country. They were taking it over, and corporations were going to own all of this. And this is what central banks and the wealthy do. They come into a country, they place debt on top of debt on top of debt. Then they come in and say, let us take your natural resources. Let us take your ports. Let us take your businesses. Let us take your mining facilities. Let us take everything from the country. And while we're doing this, we want you to make the people suffer with austerity. And this is exactly what we have seen in Greece. And the people there could not take it anymore. And this is why they needed a change. And of course, the central bankers are out there saying that Greece is going to be in trouble. There might be a bank holiday. There is terrorism inside the country. They're using everything they possibly can to bring that government in line with them. And we can see that the Greek government is actually going in the opposite direction. The Greeks right now are saying, listen, we are opposed to Russian sanctions. They're saying that, you know what? The continuation of existing EU sanctions, including visa bans and asset freezes on Russian officials and Moscow-supported separatists, when they come up for renewal in March, sanctions require a unanimous vote from the 28 governments. And the Greek government might veto the sanctions. They might say, you know what? We don't want to place more sanctions on Russia. We can see that the Greek government is now pivoting towards Russia. Greece's new premier, Tsipras, did hint with his initial action that Greece may indeed pivot quite aggressively away from Europe and toward Russia in general and join the Eurasian Economic Union. The new premier halted the blue light special liquidation of Greece to those highest bidders who have the closest access to various printing presses, and stopped the privatization of Greece's biggest port on Tuesday, signaling he aims to stick to election pledges despite warning shots from the Eurozone and the financial markets. A German central banker warned of dire problems should the new government call the country's aid program into question, where they don't want to pay off the debt, where they want to write some of that off. And he says this might jeopardize funding for their banks. This entire system would have a fatal consequence for Greece's financial system. The Greek banks would lose their access to the central bank money. And how will the banks get their money? This could cause a major problem. Basically, they're trying to blackmail the new government. They're trying to scare them into staying with the EU. But we have to remember that if Greece decides to say, you know what, we don't want to deal with the EU anymore, we don't want to be part of the private Western Central Bank system, We can always turn to the BRIC system, because guess what? They have a banking system in place, and our banks can get the money from those central banks. And if we join them, we no longer need the EU. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully, because this might happen. You have to remember, Russia is making a deal with Turkey. Turkey then is going to control the gas supplies going through its country. Greece is going to be a hub in this new gas route. And we can see right now, this is going to be the new Turkish stream. And Greece is going to make a lot of money off of this, which will revitalize part of their economy. They're also making deals with China to spur economic growth. What does the EU have to offer at this point? Well, they've given them debt over many, many years. The US has done nothing except support more debt. They have nothing to offer at this point. Russia, China, the BRIC system seems to have a lot more to offer to push economic growth in the country. And we can see right now, the central bankers are going to do whatever they possibly can to try to stop this, even if they have to use dirty methods like we've seen in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to close down the banking system, put in a bank holiday, try to collect the money that's in the banks so the people can't get it, so the government can't access it. We're going to have to watch this and see what occurs and which way the Greek government goes. Now, out in Canada, we understand they play the same manipulation game just like the EU, just like the United States, where they manipulate statistical numbers. Canada just outdid itself moments ago when it reported that those 185,000 job gains it had previously reported for all of 2014, well, it was only kidding. Basically what they did is they completely revised their job numbers. The number has been revised a whopping 35% lower to only 121,000. So basically, they are manipulating their information because they realize 2015 is going to be worse. They want that number lower, so it looks like 2015 is better. What does the U.S. do when they manipulate their numbers? The same exact thing. They go back in time and they revise the statistical information. They did it with GDP. They decided that they needed to include research and development, so they went back into 1929, included research and development, and then recalculated all the way up to the present to keep GDP in the green. They don't count those people that can't find work. They say they've given up. They don't want to pay their bills. They don't want to go on vacation. They don't want to help their children with food, clothing. They don't want to put them they don't want to go on vacation. They don't want to buy them merchandise from retailers. They don't want to do any of that. They just given up. They rather have no money coming in. It's absolutely ridiculous. Basically what is happening is these people cannot find work. I know many people who cannot find work. It's actually the job market has left the people. These people have very good skills. They've been working in the business arena for a very long time. And a lot of them have had to take jobs that their salary is much, much lower, which makes it very hard then to pay off your mortgage, to pay off your cars, and to keep your payments up. And this is why people end up losing their homes, losing their cars, and so forth and so on. And those people who cannot find those jobs, they resort to part-time jobs. And this is why we have become a part-time nation. And this is why salaries are continually falling. And we see that more and more people are being laid off. Tesco International is closing 43 UK stores. Sony is going to cut 1,000 jobs from their mobile division. Sears, they're going to lay off 100 people in their headquarters. That's not including all the people that they're laying off from all their closures of their stores. SMA Solar International is laying off 1,600 people. So we can see right now that more and more companies are laying off. Now, IBM has not given us their final figure of how many people they're laying off. They're saying it's not going to be as much as 100,000. But I'm going to predict that, yes, it's going to be way up there. It's going to be like 10, 20, maybe 30,000 people that they're going to lay off. And I believe this is why they decided to put that number so high so people go, oh, look, it was only 25,000, not that bad. But that's a lot of people who will be looking for work, because when you take into account already from the start of this year, there were 32,000 people laid off and more is on the way. This is a big problem because these jobs are going away. It is not getting better. And when we look at the U.S. minimum wage, we realize that the minimum wage has declined by 90% in real money in just the last 40 years. And when I say real money, I'm talking as it is referenced to gold. In 1968, 22 hours of work on minimum wage bought you an ounce of gold. In 2011, 200 hours of work were required to afford an ounce of gold. Today's astonishing graphs that show that the minimum wage has dropped by 90% is done by comparing it to real money, and that is gold. Over the past 80 years, we see that minimum wage has dropped quite a bit. And if you like to see this graph, it is on the x22report.com site, and you can see as soon as we left the gold standard in 1971, because of speculation, and it was temporary from 1971 until the present day, which I'd say is permanent, we see that the value of minimum wage and what the dollar can purchase has declined. And it's down by 90%. And by continually giving people higher minimum wage, raising the minimum wage amount, will not really fix the problem. It's a Band-Aid effect. But eventually what will happen is the same thing that's happened since 1971. It catches up with you, and you need another raise, and another raise, and another raise. But guess what? Food, fuel, and everything else continually goes up faster than the minimum wage amount. It will never work. And the problem of all of this is the central banking system, because when the central banking system first started out, they loaned the government, let's say, $1, and they expected $2 back. Well, they created the $1 out of thin air. The government didn't have $2 to pay back. So what did the central bank have to do? They had to create more money, and the government had to borrow more money. And as this process went on over time, it's an impossibility to repay this amount back. It will not work. And we see that it is completely understandable by Greece, France, Italy, and many of the other countries that they can't pay any of this back. The governments cannot sustain themselves. They will crash, and so will the United States. Because there will come a point in time where there's no more money. People have nothing else to give. The government can't bring in the revenue. And then this is when it all starts to crumble apart. And we're approaching this time period very, very quickly. Now, as we know, the government is continually telling us that manufacturing is doing very well, that the country is doing very well, and we have been tracking the Baltic Dry Index. And yes, it does fluctuate. It goes up, and the average is, when you look at the graph, it's about between 1,000 and 2,000 points. We had a spike back in 2007, 2008, where it reached 11,000 points. It came all the way down during the Great Recession to 647 points. And this is raw material that is shipped around the world, and it is the raw material that is used for manufacturing. And it's pretty much protected against speculation. And we've been tracking that the Baltic Dry Index has been falling. And it has fallen again to 666 points. It is below 700 points. We're getting very close to the 647 points when we were in a Great Recession. What does this tell us? It tells us that the economy is not doing well. But of course, the central banking system, the U.S. government, they like to tell us that no, the reason why the Baltic Dry Index is falling like this, it's because there's oversupply. But we can look at it another way. Maybe there's under demand. So we can see that they try to stay away from this whatsoever. You really don't see this in the corporate media. They don't like to report on this because people then say, wait a minute, what is going on here? And we're starting to see that the Baltic Dry Index right now is the lowest ever on record for this time of year. And we're going to have to watch this very closely. And we can see that, yes, will it fluctuate back up? Maybe. But as we can see, the trend is a downward trend. The economies of the world, of the private Western Central Bank world, are falling apart. And this is why they are trying as hard as they possibly can to get that event started, to cover up this entire collapse of the system. We see the Fed is out there today, trying to convince everyone that, yes, the economy is doing well. They have said that there are strong job gains. Well, what does that actually mean? Because it can mean anything. Do they mean there's strong job gains in the part-time area? Because that is true. But are we actually seeing quality jobs? Not really. We can see that the economy is on solid pace instead of a moderate pace for the growing economy. It's solid. We're in a recovery. But we know we are not. We can see that they're going to raise interest rates, and they keep saying, yes, interest rates will be increased by the middle of this year. Well, you know what's going to happen once this happens. If they try to tick up the interest rates, things are just going to come crashing down. Look what happened in 2008. The interest rates continually went higher and higher and higher. And the adjustable rate mortgages, those people that were holding them, their payments were going up. People were trying to lock in, and every day the rates went up even further. People couldn't make the payments. People stopped purchasing homes. People stopped purchasing cars. This is why they've been keeping the rates down low at this point. Because they realize once these go up, it is game over. The American people are tapped out. All these ridiculous programs that they're putting in to get the subprime people in, it will not work. We might see a little bump up, which we are seeing a little bit in real estate, in the auto industry, but guess what? It's based on subprime people. Think about this for a second. People who do not have the income. People who really can't make the payments. We saw this during 2007-2008. Subprime securities. And this is why we saw everyone just leaving the homes. This is why we saw the car manufacturers completely implode on themselves. The same thing is happening right now. Now, we understand the government, the central bankers are out there, and they're trying to get as much revenue as they possibly can into the country. And they've been making deals all around the world, and it's called FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, where they like to look into your bank account, and if you have over $50,000, they would like to tax you. Tax you for the U.S., and you'll be taxed where you are. Russian banks had been forced to cancel contracts with their U.S. clients due to the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. If a bank does not comply, it may be subject to a fine or sanctions. We could not put our national security under risk, Russia says. This is why we adopted the rule to just cancel the contract of United States people who are banking with us. They can no longer bank with Russia. So we can see right now, a lot of countries are going to start looking at this and say, you know what? Maybe we should do the same thing. Because if they don't turn over your private information from these banks, they can be fined and sanctioned. And we can see already that the Swiss decided to depeg their franc from the euro, their second move might be, you know what, we're not going to deal with FATCA, leave us out of this. We're not going to comply. Because for years and years and years, that was the whole basis of Swiss banking, that your information in these banks were private. They would not hand them over to any government. Now, we understand that these false flag events that occurred in Canada, Australia, and Paris, they were being used for many different agendas. And we can see the governments right now are putting troops on the ground, that they're creating draconian laws that will violate people's rights, which will allow them to spy on people and to search you and take away your freedom of speech. And we can see this was done on purpose because they realize the collapse is coming. Europe right now is planning to collect 42 pieces of data from air travelers. Passengers flying to and from Europe will now be forced to submit a long list of personal details, which can be stored for up to 5 years. The TSA is doing the same exact thing. The counterterrorism plan would record data such as meal preferences and how many flights someone has missed and many other things that are very personal to you. The directive has been introduced by the European Commission and requires air travelers to fill in 42 separate pieces of information. The ministers issued a joint statement saying there was a crucial and urgent need to move toward a European passenger name record system. The proposal would create a pan-European super database with the information on tens of millions of air travelers shared amongst the 28 EU countries. Of course, human rights groups are out there, and they've criticized the move for what they perceive is a blanket harvesting of personal information, and that's exactly what it is. We see the United States doing it, we're seeing Europe do it, we're seeing troops on the ground right now, and we see all these draconian laws. This is not to stop terrorism. This is to keep the people in control. They want to control the people. We have to keep them in line. This is their mentality. And this is how they believe they should do this. Jan Philip Albrecht, Vice Chairman of the European Parliament Civil Liberties Committee, said, "The Commission plans are an effort to the critics of the European Parliament and the European Court of Justice who have said the data retention without any link to certain risk or suspicion isn't proportionate. You haven't done anything, but they're keeping all your information." This is being done on purpose to track every single person, to keep social profiles, to understand who you know and what you're doing, where you're banking, what you're purchasing. And this will be done all throughout Europe, Canada, Australia, and here in the United States. We see the FBI is planning to collect DNA from everybody. The FBI, with the private industry and Congress, is helping to push the most massive expansion of biometric state surveillance since the invention of the fingerprint. The FBI cut the ribbon on its $1 billion biometrics database called the Next Generation Identification. Since NGI's official launch, state and local law enforcement officials have been encouraged to submit face prints, fingerprints, retina scans, photos of tattoos and scars, and DNA collected from people nationwide to the FBI central database. And this is why we've been seeing the local police out there with private corporations stopping you in traffic to collect your DNA. Those state and local officials can also search against the FBI biometric store if they want to identify someone. The FBI has big goals when it comes to biometric databases, but they can't achieve them without the active buy-in and assistance of state and local police, and this is why they're becoming nationalized. So they all are controlled by the government. And all of this then will control you. And basically what they want to do is they want to track every single person. You have to remember, DHS right now is creating a real ID system where every single state has to come in compliance, and they will take all your information. You'll get a new license. It will have a fingerprint, a barcode, RFID chip, retina scan, and most likely your DNA information encoded on this, and it will be sent up to a main database. And this database then will be shared with Canada, Mexico, and most likely Europe. And we can see right now that they are preparing to push this out. And if we do a little bit of a flashback right now, we saw that President Bush, signed a bill back in 2007 called the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act. The new law S 1858, and that was to collect DNA from every single newborn. And this is exactly what they're going to do. They're most likely going to do this with newborns, or if they didn't get them, most likely they'll have a program in school to collect and make sure they have all of this on file. But we see DHS right now is launching their iris and facial recognition at the borders. You have to remember, this is all part of the Real ID system, so they can stop you, identify you. Keep an eye on who you are, where you are, what you're purchasing, who you are in contact with, what organizations you are with, because their biggest threat is the people. The biggest threat is the people to their authority. They're nervous. They're scared. This is why the wealthy already have escape plans. They're prepared for this collapse. They're prepared for what's going on. And they're planning to roll this out this summer to the border. And they will be able to share images with the FBI's massive multi-biometric system. So all of this will be interconnected. They'll have all the information they want with the help from local and state police. Now, we understand that the U.S. government, these central bankers, they like to get involved in all countries around the world. Actually, what they like to do is put in a government that will work with them. And if there isn't one in there, what they do is they gin up some protests. They create a regime change, and we've seen this happen all throughout the Middle East. We've seen it in Ukraine. They tried it in Venezuela. They're trying it all over the place right now in China and Russia. And we see the Thai officials now are saying, listen, U.S., stop interfering in our country's internal affairs. Just stop. We don't want you involved. And we see a lot of countries doing this. We see the Yemen people saying that they do not want to deal with the U.S. government right now. And of course, the U.S. government is trying to deal with them, but they do not trust them. And a lot of the countries around the world do not trust the United States. Now, when I say the United States, I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the government. When I talk about any of these countries, it is the government, not the people. People don't want war. People don't want to go out and take over different countries. This is the government's central banking system. Those are the people that want all of this. They want power. They want wealth. They want control. And this is what I mean when I talk about each one of these countries. We see it out in North Korea that the United States is continually pushing their agenda. And South Korea, United States, and Japan are fueling tensions on the Korean peninsula. And we can see they're continually doing this. And Russia has noticed that, yes, it is South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. pushing and provoking in this area. And they are looking at each one of these situations and saying, hey, we know what's going on here. We understand that you're trying to push war, just like they're trying to do in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, the pivot to Asia. They are pushing as hard as they can to get a war started. Now, we understand that France and the United States are in Mali. We understand that the UN troops are also there. And it seems that there was a protest going on in Mali. And these were unarmed civilians who were protesting, and the UN troops started shooting and killing unarmed demonstrators. UN forces have also been implicated in atrocities, murder, rape, and more, even against children all across Africa and beyond. Instead of reining in the UN forces, the Obama administration is actively working to further empower them with even more U.S. wealth, technology, and military assets. Yes, because the central banking system, they want all of these areas. They want the natural resources. And we can see from everything they've done and from their actions, they don't care about the people. Actually, sometimes they're in the way, and they need to remove them in any way they possibly can. And if they have to kill them, they will do that. Now, Canada is providing Ukraine with $200 million in loans. That brings it up to about $400 million. We see the EU has given about $1.8 billion, and we see the United States has given Ukraine about $2 billion. Now again, Ukraine is following in the footsteps of Greece, where they're just continually taking on more and more debt, and we see that this will only keep the country going for a certain period of time before it collapses, because they don't have revenue coming in and their entire system is collapsing. But don't worry, the Ukraine government, the bankers that are inside the government, with the help of UK, United States, they will push war. President Poroshenko said that Kiev will continue to put pressure on Moscow to motivate Russia to the negotiating table. Actually, it was the opposite way around. Putin came out and met with Poroshenko to bring him to the negotiating table to stop the war. But now they're trying to convince everyone, oh no, it's Ukraine that's trying to do this. There was a deal already in place. Ukraine continually violates it. And we can see they're pushing this as hard as they can. Now they want to talk peace. They want to have peace, but their actions show the opposite. What did Ukraine just do? Ukraine Parliament on Tuesday approved a statement labeling Russia as an aggressor state. Of course, with no proof. They just decided to do this. What else did they do? Well, they just labeled the Donetsk and Lugansk area terrorist organizations. They don't want peace. They want war. We can see right now that Victoria Nuland is out there, and she is saying NATO member countries must redouble their efforts in Ukraine and quick to install their command centers around the country. You must install the 6 border command centers around Ukraine as soon as possible, she said, adding the NATO should become spearhead that will allow us to move quickly to areas of conflict. If I'm wrong about this, maybe I don't understand, but last I heard, Ukraine is not part of NATO. But of course, they don't care about this. NATO is in there. Paid mercenaries are in there. And we realize they are pushing this as hard as they can. She says NATO is a defense organization. Our goal is to discourage countries from any aggression. But if the goal fails, we must be ready to attack. So we can see where they are going with this. They are pushing their agenda. They want the forces there. They're getting ready to move forward. And we can see right now that the Ukraine government is having a very tough time. They have lost their ability to push their offensive forward. A lot of the people that are being drafted, who receive the draft notice, don't appear for active duty. They just disappear. The last 2,000 people who were drafted didn't even show up. And we're starting to learn those people who are drafted, who go through the training, which is very limited at this point, they are pushed right out there into battle, and the Ukrainian military are employing barrier troops, which stay behind them and point weapons at them and say, no, don't retreat, go forward. And we can see that this is coming from a Ukrainian soldier who was injured, who said, we couldn't retreat because other paid mercenaries were behind us telling us to advance, and they had weapons pointing at us. So the only place we could go is forward. And we can see that Ukraine does have paid mercenaries inside of the country doing its work. We've seen a film with someone who speaks English. And of course, Jen Psaki is out there telling everybody that, oh, no, there's no Western paid mercenaries in Ukraine. That's ridiculous. But we know from what we've been seeing, we know from what we understand is, yes, they are there. Now, Ukraine is out there, and they're pushing internet army. They're going to control bloggers to report on what is going on in Ukraine, to counteract the new and alternative media, whatever you like to call the new media, alternative media. Everyone has a different term for it. So basically, they have internet warriors. They will distribute reliable information as it passes through the Ukrainian government. So how reliable is this? Well, as we've seen in the past, Ukraine continually lies. And now they're just going to put a lot of bloggers out there, and they're going to have to get their stuff approved. And if it's not the story they want to tell, guess what? It will not be published. So basically, they're trying to control the flow of information, and that is all they're trying to do. Now, there is a German political and business consultant, Michael, I'm going to try to pronounce his last name here, Luders. He was in an interview with a TV channel in Phoenix, and he made an allegation. He's saying there are 500 mercenaries in Ukraine, all trained experts, requisitioned in cooperation between the United States and Ukraine. And we can see right now, he's saying that, yes, it is the Blackwater firm, or I think they're called Academy right now, or Academy, however they pronounce their name. And we can see right now the United States uses them often in these areas. And he is saying that, yes, there are these troops in there. We've seen a video, and I have it placed on the x22report.com site, of one of these people that are inside of Ukraine. And you can see that, yes, he is an Englishman, and he has been identified, and his name is Leon Swampy, and he is from London, England. So he has been identified, and we know that he is not Ukrainian. He has been brought in there with many others that have been intertwined into the Ukrainian forces. Now, out in Iran, we understand they are continuing with the P5+1 talks, and we realize the United States government is trying to place more sanctions on Iran. So Iran came out and said, listen, if you place more sanctions while we're in the middle of peace talks, which makes no sense whatsoever, we have voted on a bill that would scrap the interim nuclear agreement if you apply these new sanctions, because it makes no sense whatsoever to place sanctions on us if we are talking about peace. And that is absolutely true. Why would you do that when you're talking about a peace deal? Now, we understand out in Yemen, the people have taken over the government. The government has fallen, and Yemen's parliament yesterday called on the UN Security Council and the Gulf Cooperation Council to enable the people of the South to exercise self-determination through an UN-supervised referendum. The South's radical camp has found itself aligned with other southern factions and had supported the central government in the context of Federation of Six Provinces. So it seems like they're going forward. The United States is sitting on the sidelines right now to see if they have the ability to deal with these new people. And you have to remember, these are the people they used to be firing upon because they call them Al-Qaeda. Now we see that Israel is continually bombing the Golan Heights. Basically, they're flying into Syria, a sovereign nation, and just bombing in that area. And it seems like Israel has deployed their Merkava tanks, and they are getting ready for some type of an offensive. And we can see they're trying to push this as hard as they possibly can in this area. So we can see that Israel is getting ready. Supplies are being shipped into Kuwait, into depots, to get ready for an offensive in Iraq and Syria. We have McCain out there saying that, yes, there's going to be troops that are going to be pushed into Iraq and Syria. This is coming very soon. We see that Washington is out there, and Jen Psaki is out there saying, listen, we want Assad still to step down. But what's happening here is there's peace talks going on with Russia, with Syria, and the opposition. And if the United States can take that eastern section of Syria, they will, because they will take that, and they will use it, and they don't have to fight in that area, and then they can take their bases there and use it as a point to go after Assad in the west. And this is what they're trying to do at this point. Now, an Islamic State leader in Pakistan came forward, And he is believed to be a Pakistan's commander of the Islamic State terrorist group, and he has confessed during an interrogation that he has been receiving funds through the United States. Al-Salafi, a Pakistani Syrian who came to the country via Turkey just last year, was arrested along with his 2 companions. During his interrogation, the local Islamic State commander revealed that he received funding channeled through America in order to run organization in Pakistan and recruit young people to fight in Syria. A source revealed to the Daily Express the U.S. funding is an open secret here, and he's saying that each person that he brought in to go fight for the Islamic State, he received about $600 per person. Now, it seems the Islamic State is making threats to the President of the United States. They're saying that they will behead him in the White House, and the Islamic State is coming to America, and they will make America a Muslim country. So you can see this propaganda is being pushed as hard as they possibly can. And they're using this to convince everyone that, yes, the Islamic State is going to arrive here in the United States. And we understand that they've been preparing for this major, major false flag event for a long time. They're getting all the pieces into place. They need to make you understand and believe that Russia, North Korea, China, they're all behind the cyber attack that will bring down the economy. We see that the Russian spies that were captured, they weren't really spies. This is all propaganda to make us believe that Russia will, and they're trying to figure out a way to bring down the economy. We also see that North Korea is being set up as attacking and cyber attacking Sony to make us believe that they have the ability to bring down the economy, power grid, and whatnot. And we can see they are pushing this agenda very hard. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.